The SEC hype train has arrived, and they've towed in some disrespect with them. But let's face it, we needed Arkansas to completely boat race Pine Bluff to set this game up for now what it is. And what it is now is an early season must win.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello, all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at All Day O State. Today, we partially brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment matter more with FanDuel. And right now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Make sure you visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Meanwhile, we get started in the conversation of Arkansas versus Oklahoma State has now become a must-win. And no, this is not clickbait material. This is a legitimate statement because of perception. Perception does, in fact, matter, regardless of what anybody in the country tries to pretend. It has to matter, right? This game should happen every single year. I want to get that out ahead of time, thanks to the status of the SEC and now the rebuilding newcomer kind of status of the Big 12. Every other year, this should be played in basketball. Thank you to the legend of the great Gallagher ABBA Arena in Eddie Sutton. And it should be played every single year in baseball. Thank you, O'Brate and Baumwalker Stadium, for being not only two of the nicest stadiums in America, but maybe the two nicest stadiums in America. And I got to thank Arkansas ahead of time for bringing a couple extra shots of adrenaline every time we do square off on the diamond for baseball. But football is here. So we need to talk about Arkansas at Oklahoma State. We needed Arkansas to dominate Arkansas Pine Bluff just as much as they needed to see that. So did the country, and realistically, Mike Gundy. Guys, a few weeks ago, this game was just kind of a fun deal on the schedule. A few weeks ago, this was just some game that Arkansas fans thought that maybe they could win simply because they're in the SEC and they're facing a Big 12 team. Typically, Big 12 teams aren't as fast, and some of the top-end SEC teams kind of blow some of the Big 12 schools out in athleticism. I think to some degree, Texas proved that in the Big 12 title game. But all he needs this game, too, simply just to remind the country that, yes, his 34-yard performance against the last SEC team we played in Texas was not a good performance. But it wasn't a good performance because he was playing at like 70-75% max. He was playing on an ankle that some of the medical staff recommended he really not play, right? They maybe considered that he should save it for the bowl game. He said, no, thanks. He put 3 pounds of tape on his ankle and he went for it. Well, that lasted for about 7 plays. And now the perception is that Ollie Gordon was only good throughout the course of the season because of the Big 12 schedule. The perception needs to change. We need the perception to change a little bit with this game, not only for bragging rights, but also to visibly see the validation that the old perception of the Cowboy poke choke is dead and gone. Guys, I hate calling a must win in week 2, but for perception, it does matter. For Mike Gundy, getting that perception monkey off of his back, it does matter. Part of that perception is due to OU, right? The perception of the Big 12 was they can make it to the big one, but never win the big one, partially because of OU. Our perception at Oklahoma State is kind of similar to that. They might be able to get to a Big 12 title game, but they can never win the Big 12 title games, a.k.a. get there but not win the big ones. Again, thanks to OU. And so I guess you can say thanks to OU, we are now in this position here where we get to face Arkansas in what is now building up to be a much bigger game. Kasey Dunn might need this more than anyone on campus or in the state of Oklahoma because there is a perception of him being a good but sometimes not so great offensive coordinator. Well, the guy on the other sideline is pretty close to great. He's as pretty close to great as you can get for an offensive coordinator. And guys, Mike Gundy needs this for Kasey Dunn to kind of validate the fact that he rolled with Kasey Dunn and said, this is the guy not only for this year, but the previous year and the year before that. There's a little bit of that monkey on his back. Not only Kasey Dunn, but obviously Mike Gundy. Right? This is going to be a huge deal for perception. Perception matters. And this is the season that we can change perception. The perception of always being a top 20, 25 team, but never really being a top 5 team. that style of conversation can change. It should change. And this is the game to do it. If there's ever been a time where Oklahoma State can make a statement to the world, it's kind of now. I mean, we've had opportunities and we've done that. If you go back and look at the Fiesta Bowl W, we have a logo too. Beating OU last year and 2 of the last 3 years, that's a we have a logo too moment. If we would have beat Texas in the Big 12 title game, that would have been one of those moments. I don't really count that Texas A&M W because they were a very depleted team that didn't really know what was happening from one week to the next as they prepared for their bowl game. This is a perception game. And we also have recruiting to take into consideration. Perception does matter. There is a perception that this is an SEC ball club that should be too much, even for a top-tier big team. Guys, a lot of their polls, the power rankings in the SEC still have Arkansas in the 13, 14-ish range. Yet you are seeing a lot of prognostications starting to matriculate out now that have Arkansas beating Oklahoma State because of the perception. They did score 10 touchdowns and 10 possessions and put up 70 points, as they should have. And today we were going to talk more about the film, but let's be real. It took about 7 plays of trying to diagnose film between Arkansas and Pine Bluff before I realized this was completely unnecessary. But it also helped me realize that this win is completely necessary for Mike Gundy and the perception. As we talked about yesterday, this is kind of a lose-lose. Well, maybe not. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe this isn't a lose-lose. Because if we do win now, it will add to the perception that if you come into Stillwater, Oklahoma, no matter what conference you're in, no matter what your last game was like, you're going to have a difficult proposition of winning. And we've got games coming up with Alabama. We've got games coming up with Oregon, the home and home style of situation. But this is a perception building game for the Big 12 as well. This goes beyond Mike Gundy and the Cowboys. Of course, somebody in the Big 12, or at least a conglomerate of a group, needs to get together and be the flag bearers to carry on the Big 12 in this new rejuvenated version of it. The Oklahoma State Cowboys should be the focal point of that, right next to a Utah and a Kansas State. But games like this are what set it up. And they've done some home and homes with Big 12 schools. They did a home and home with TCU, and they went there and won. They did a home and home with Texas Tech, went to Lubbock and won. They did a home and home with BYU, went to Provo and won. So the perception is this is yet another Big 12 team that they can come to and beat. They're not respecting our seniority all that much. Now, when I say they, I'm talking primarily about the fans and the players. Whenever you look at a lot of the different podcasts and YouTube shows and things of that nature out there involving Hog Nation, most of them are not being overly confident, nor are they being overly cocky. Neither is Sam Pittman. Guys, I love Sam Pittman. I wish I didn't, but I do. I don't necessarily love some of the things that their players have had to say. I will say that it might be beneficial. It is locker room material. I am glad it's getting circulated out there, but not for those reasons. It is bulletin board material, sure, but not of the variety that you might be thinking of, at least not from my perception of it. But before we break that down, I do have to remind the fine folks out here that FanDuel is the best in the game, and you need to be rocking and rolling with FanDuel today. You got to make every moment matter more with FanDuel because it's the best in the business. Guys, there's a reason that it's the #1 sports book betting partner in the United States of America. There's a reason that everybody in the country can look at FanDuel and understand that there's some money-making opportunities. I think there's lots of money to be made on behalf of the Cowboys. If you've noticed, the line for this Arkansas game has gone from a 10-point spread to a 7-point spread, which means people are betting heavy on Arkansas. The hype is building, but you can capitalize on the hype building as well by doubling down on the Cowboys, hammering the over. Right now, also, we have something a little bit different for you now through September 22nd. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market NFL game. All you'll need is a Google account and a current form of payment you can cancel at any point in time. You just need to get squared away today by visiting FanDuel.com to download the America's #1 sportsbook. Make sure you visit FanDuel.com to get squared away today in the #1 in the land. It's FanDuel, and it's the right thing for you to get squared away with, so don't waste any more time. Get it done today. From FanDuel back to football, are the Arkansas Razorbacks doing a little bit too much? Now, again, I'm not talking about Sam Pittman. I'm not talking about the shows and the podcast for the most part. Of course, a lot of people are now picking Arkansas to win. But again, this is a good thing for Oklahoma State, in my personal opinion. I do think that this is bulletin board material, but I don't love it for that reason. I love it because, maybe there's a false sense of security going on here. But I love it also because this needs to be bulletin board material, not in the locker room, but in Kasey Dunn's room, his office, his bedroom, his bathroom, every room that you can find, every hallway you can put it down that pertains to Kasey Dunn. If his wife has got to put it on his toothbrush, I'm okay with it, because that did happen. South Alabama did publicly laugh at how basic our play calls were and how easy our offense was to read. They had a couple different Okies on that team that talked about how it was the most simplistic thing they've had to diagnose, and they knew what every single route was going to be because they found them in practice and they worked on them. And sure enough, the game comes and literally every single thing that they had scheduled pretty much came to fruition. So it made the game not fast for them at all. So the speed of the Big 12 compared to South Alabama didn't even matter because they knew all of the routes. They knew all of the concepts predicated upon who we had in personnel-wise and who we had shifting. And that basic packaging was an absolute disaster. They did laugh at us. And Marquise Robinson did, in fact, come in and say that he expects them to come dominate. This Arkansas team, he expects them to come dominate because, to some degree, he did with South Alabama. And, yeah, he only had a couple tackles and a pick. But as Cowboy fans, we do remember number 7 flying around and being a massive problem. So I'm not going to throw shade and say he's not good enough to make these comments. He is. But, again, that's another reason why I love it. This shouldn't be in the locker room. It should be in Kasey Dunn's room, office, bedroom. You get the drift. This has become a must-win now for perception. Not only for Mike Gundy, but definitely for Kasey Dunn, and even a bigger layer is going to be Brian Nardo. But we're going to break down some of the matchups tomorrow. But we have to prove that this is the new age NIL Gundy, and the perception of Oklahoma State not always winning the big ones can change with this one. Guys, this is not just about competing against their big 3. This is not just, talking about their players being overly confident. I mean, you do want your players confident, right? There's a difference between cocky and confidence. There's some cockiness with the fans. There's some cockiness with some of the players, but overall it's been pretty positive. And Sam Pittman's obviously been one of those guys that has been, very, very positive in viewing this. And Mike Gundy, he had a lot of wonderful things to say. I implore you to go check out what he had to say. But this is not South Alabama. This is not the same locker room. South Alabama was, in fact, able to capitalize on the fact that the locker room was fractured. We had a decent number of guys that kind of wanted to follow Spencer Sanders. Then we had a decent number of guys that didn't want to follow Spencer Sanders. Spencer Sanders had some disagreements, although some of them were viable, right? There was some reasoning for Spencer Sanders to have some of that disgruntlement, but at the end of the day, it caused so many problems in the locker room that it wasn't really a good look. Now, we found a way this last season to battle through that, right? Because what happened the year prior, the beginning of last season, there was still some locker room fracturing. It wasn't near as bad as the previous season, but we hadn't rebuilt the Cowboy culture exactly to where we have it now. It took last season for that to happen. And last season proved to everybody in America that Mike Gundy has all of his traits still available. Right, the fastball, curveball, slider, he has all of it still at his disposal. The game hasn't passed him by. He's not viewing things from a Nick Saban, I want to be done with this, or a Dabo Swinney, or I'm refusing to be around this. He hasn't done all that, but it took last season for him to fully kind of show it to all of us out here in Cowboy country. So the disrespect that we're feeling is real. The animosity that some of the players and some of the fans are building between Oklahoma State and Arkansas, also real. But the ability for this to catapult Oklahoma State into a potentially new category, that's something that's also very real. And I think that this confidence that Arkansas has could be slightly problematic. You wanted a team like South Dakota State to roll in a little bit overconfident, and I think that they did. And if you listen to some of the things their coach has to say, there's a little bit of that rat poison going around. Maybe there's some rat poison going around at Arkansas, and maybe not. But seemingly, if you listen to the player interviews, although not many of them are like, outright saying the things that Mr. Marcus is, but you can definitely get the feeling that although they're given respect, right? They had an offensive lineman interview, and he talked about how, from the O-line, D-line perspective, Oklahoma State is an SEC-sized team with a SEC-style depth. I'm glad that some of the players are taking some recognition of what this Oklahoma State team is. We do have SEC size all up and down the lineup. Did we a couple years ago? No. Will we have in a couple years? Maybe, maybe not. But this team is SEC sized. We play an SEC style of football, or at least the old school SEC style of football. We are going to lean on Ollie Gordon, but we do have a lot of faith in the wide receivers. Arkansas does have some limitations. As much as I think Taylor Green was phenomenal, he also mechanically has some things that are exploitable. The wide receivers, they look good, but against Arkansas Pine Bluff, they didn't really need to run crisp routes. They haven't really necessarily been tested like our wide receivers will. And I think the same can be said on the other side of the ball. Our corners haven't been tested by a wide receiver group quite this good in a little while, from a speed perspective, for sure. I'm not worried about size. I'm not worried about strength. Speed might be a little tricky. We're going to find out if we have it. We have several guys that have been clocked over, 18 to 22 miles an hour this spring, this fall. Do we have enough of those guys to keep up? They certainly don't seem to think so. And for all of the coaches that are not saying, well, we're in the SEC, therefore we should just be better than a Big 12 school, most of them feel it, right? In the position group meetings, there's got to be a little bit of that. Yeah, but they are the Big 12, right? I mean, they're good. We respect how good they are. We respect Mike Gundy. We respect the 20 returning starters and the 90% of the roster, but they're still the Big 12. And we just witnessed what Texas, with a full complement of top-end SEC talent, can do to the best Big 12 team. Again, perception matters. It's going to be up to Brian Nardo and Mike Gundy and Kasey Dunn to change this perception. This is the season to do it. I don't know of another time where we've had this much coming back, especially at meaningful positions that have played meaningful snaps in what has now become a massively meaningful game. And not to mention, again, the recruiting. We have lots of battles with Arkansas. I mean, we kind of have for a long time. This is a big moment, a must-win to kind of help shift perception, even in the recruiting department. Sometimes you got to make those shifts. Sometimes you got to do those things. Just like we got to make a shift to talk about eBay Motors. With the right passion, drive, and performance, it's never any wonder why eBay Motors is so highly sought after. Just like it shouldn't be any question for you on who you're going to use to replace any part you have coming up on your ride or die rig. eBay Motors is going to have everything you need to maintain your vehicle, whether it's superchargers, roof racks, LED lighting kits, exhaust, speed, power, style, doesn't matter. eBay Motors is going to have you covered. With over 122 million parts to choose from, it is very easy to keep your rig alive today. You'll find exactly what you're looking for, and with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, the part is guaranteed to fit your rig every time or your money back. With eBay Motors, the objective is to have you burning a rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need, all the prices you want, it is that easy to turn your rig into the MVP today. Bring home your next big, huge W with eBay. Keep your ride or die rig alive at ebaymotors.com. Again, that is ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. The eBay Guaranteed Fit is only eligible for U.S. customers because, of course, you are special. This would be a special day. It would be a special dub if the Cowboys can, in fact, get it together and get it done. We're going to keep hammering home why this is a must-win. This isn't some crazy talk. Perception does matter. There is a clear delineation between the SEC and the Big 12. And I'm not sitting here pretending that there isn't nor that there shouldn't be. But for a mid-tier SEC school to be continuously talked about in the same breath as a top-tier Big 12 school, it is disrespectful. But the only way that you adjust it, you correct it, you fix it, is if you do something about it. Again, part of this perception is because of OU and their shortcomings in BCS games and playoff games. Just like that same shortcoming is viewed at Oklahoma State with Mike Gundy in Bedlam. The recruiting, that's the layer that maybe means the most. The Oklahoma connection makes this, to me, an even bigger must-win. Arkansas has always been a little bit of a thorn on our recruiting side. It's like we don't want to exacerbate that issue now. If we do, it'll eventually become a problem, right? Sam Pittman is an Okie. He's an Okie with Oklahoma high school recruiting connections. He runs in the same recruiting circles, and he knows Cale Gundy very, very well from recruiting. He's from Grove, Oklahoma. He went to Pitt State in Kansas, literally right up the road from the Oklahoma border. Guys, they currently have a solid handful of Okies on the roster. They have an equally solid handful of Kansas, Topeka, Wichita area dudes on this roster. They've got a handful of kids from Frisco, Texas. They've got a handful of kids from the DFW Metroplex area. They stole A.J. Green, who was a 4-star from us, from right out of the Tulsa high school area, because they originally stole Colin Clay, who I believe was a 4-star at the time as well. He switched it up, made the right decision, decided to come back home, but originally he was an Arkansas Razorback. They got 6'5", 295-pound Owasso tackle Blake Cherry to commit when his teammate, right, Riker Half, is a Cowboy. He's coming to Oklahoma State. We had to compete in the 2025 class against them with wide receiver Cameron Powell, running back DJ Duggar, cornerback Kobe Foreman, wide receiver Jaden Perez, tight end Jordan Vaborny. And Vaborny, Perez, Foreman, Duggar, they all had Arkansas, I believe, in their final 3. So it wasn't just we had to compete against them. We had to compete against them at the very, very end to even land the dudes. And then in the 2026 class, it's much of the same, with Norman, Oklahoma wide receiver Mason Jones, Taj Brooks out of Owasso, the Jinx running back, KD Jones. He might not even have us in his top 5, really. Just like Luke Hawes didn't. He didn't legitimately have Oklahoma State in his top 5 or his top 3, right? That was a statement, in my opinion. Even though he's got a bunch of teammates on this team, it still wasn't much of a consideration for him. I'm not going to say that's disrespectful, but I mean, it kind of is, right? To some degree. But at the end of the day, this game does matter, especially now, for perception purposes. Because Sam Pittman and the Arkansas Razorbacks, they recruit in the same areas we do. They talk to the same dudes we do about essentially running the same style of programs that we both do. They have the perception on their side, though. They have the SEC and all the NIL abilities, the TV marketing, the TV viewership, and all the fun stuff that comes with all of that. We may not have that, but we have the consistency, right? Our Cowboy culture has needed a couple of injections over the 20 years of Mike Gundy being here, but by and large, the Cowboy culture is typically always going to be the same, and it's going to be the same due to consistency. That consistency has equaled a bunch of wins. Arkansas's culture has taken many twists and turns and ups and downs and things that they need to adjust. So I would argue that they low-key need this to be a must-win as well to help their fan base validate that this is a new Razorback crew. And the addition of Bobby Petrino isn't just going to be good for a few games, but it's going to be good for Sam Pittman and all of us as a fan base moving forward. We have the winning on our side. We have the recent tradition of having those double-digit seasons, right? We don't have the TCU issues of winning 11, 12, down to 4 or 5. We don't do that. We'll win 11, 12, then go down to 8, which isn't acceptable. That's the perception of Oklahoma State inside Stillwater, Oklahoma, and the area of Oklahoma has obviously improved. The perception of Oklahoma State in Big 12 country has obviously improved. But has it improved enough? Clearly not enough in the recruiting landscape. And there should never be a scenario where somebody as good as Luke Haas gets out of the state of Oklahoma without Oklahoma State being in the top 3. I mean, I don't want to make the argument, but I will almost make the argument that even OU should be in the top 3 or the final 3 of the Oklahoma top-end recruits. It's not always going to happen. Arkansas has always been an issue for us to some degree in the recruiting area. So as much as the perception is that Arkansas is in the SEC and therefore it comes with all of these perks and all of these benefits, the perception of Oklahoma State needs to change this season. Any negativity surrounding Oklahoma State nationally has the ability to change this season. But not if you lose this game. If they would have just barely beat Pine Bluff and then we turn around and just barely beat Arkansas, it's probably not even much of a conversation. It was just a game on the schedule that was kind of fun, that had some old Southwest Conference, ties to it. But they did boat race Pine Bluff. They did display a quarterback in Talon Green that looked like an athletic specimen that fits right in with all of the other SEC athletes. They do have a running back in Jaquindon Jackson that went from playing quarterback to running back to excelling to then transferring to now showing that he can do more than just get north and south. He can wiggle a little bit of east and west in there as well. And of course, Luke Haas. Don't really want to talk a bunch about him because it does hurt my heart and soul. Okay, at least a little bit. But that's perception. Perception has been that Oklahoma State can get to some games, but they can't always win those games. Perception is that Oklahoma State and Mike Gundy can get to the top of the mountain, but not over the top of the mountain. And certainly a week 2 matchup against virtually anybody doesn't typically have much of a bearing on whether you're going to eclipse the mountaintop or not. And at the end of the day, the season's goals don't really have a lot to do with this game. So from that perspective, on both sides of the aisle, whether you're an Arky fan or a Cowboy fan, I get that. But I think Arkansas fans would argue that we've got to win on the road. We're kind of better on the road than we are at home, or at least last season. And we've got to steal a couple road games, whether it be Oklahoma State, Auburn, whatever it may be. They are viewing this as a stealable game. They're also viewing this as a game that will showcase everybody nationally that, okay, Arkansas, we've got some stuff to prove, but we're here. And on the other side, for Mike Gundy, he needs this game for perception. Ollie Gordon needs this game for perception. Our fan base to grow at any clip, we need this just as much as everybody else. For what? For perception. Perception on the field, perception in the rankings, perception in recruiting, perception on the road. Perception in general, I think, has gotten better under Brett Yormark's leadership in the new Big 12. But it will take a hit if this game goes sideways, just like it would take a hit if SMU beat up on BYU. These are the things that we don't need to have happen. We've got to take care of business. We've got to make this statement because that's what it is. It's a statement to everybody in the country in a must-win in what kind of felt like a lose-lose not too long ago. All righty, y'all. That's all we're going to have for this one right here. As always, you know I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here on Locked On Oklahoma State. You could be anywhere, so happy you choose to be here. Like it if you like the daggone thing. Dislike it if you don't, because that's okay too. More importantly, share, comment, and subscribe. On podcast people out there, you're the bricks, the butter, foundation. Do what you do, hit the stars, leave a review. Later, my taters.